Does selfless dedication deserve betrayal? In my past life, I led everyone to die for the world only to be cursed in return. After rebirth, I just want to live a selfish life for myself for once. Back then, I struggled in a pool of blood, forcing myself to activate the last bit of perception magic in my body, squeezing out a few broken gasps from my throat. If there were any other survivors on this battlefield, even just moving or making a sound would be fine. I held on to one last glimmer of hope and expectation, but the surroundings were terrifyingly silent, not even a hint of response, and I myself was about to collapse. That great emperor, who was the first in history to unify demon territory, pushing humanity to the brink of extinction. To resist him, I resolutely led all the mages of the White Tower, shouldering the heavy mission of protecting all living beings, embarking on this perilous journey against demons to protect humanity's future. My companions and I never retreated even an inch, even if it meant burning out our souls. When the emperor charged with the demon elite forces, we fought valiantly until our last trace of magical essence was exhausted, and finally, with the opportunity my companions bought with their lives, I slayed the emperor. In the last moment of my life, I saw a dragon. She was the last dragon in the world, and also the observer who recorded history. She said, "White Tower Master, I have good news and bad news for you." I asked her to tell me the bad news first. The bad news was that the demon army attacked the White Tower in revenge. The tower was destroyed, magic books and research materials were almost all burned. The good news was that the royal army arrived earlier than expected and saved some survivors. She then asked if I regretted today's choice. My throat tightened, unable to speak even half a sentence. She asked softly if I had any last words. I only begged her to look after my surviving disciples. The dragon bowed respectfully, saying she would visit them occasionally. I laughed, saying I never thought the noble dragon race would bow to a mere mortal. She stated frankly that I completely deserved such respect. To say I had no regrets in this life would be false. I may have been the greatest mage, but not a good leader. If given another chance, even if branded a villain, I wanted to live a selfish life thinking only of my own people. My consciousness was slowly sinking into endless darkness. Finally, I felt the dragon's fingertip gently touch my eyes that couldn't close. A shooting star streaked across the sky, as if adding the final footnote to my regretful life. Later, history recorded that the White Tower Master led his mages in a death battle against the Demon Emperor. At the cost of complete annihilation of body and soul, he slayed the Demon Lord and brought peace to the world. But folk rumors spread. Far from grateful, people cursed the White Tower mages as disaster stars who brought demons into the world. 20 years later, wind whistled through the White Tower. Leaves drifted through the window frame, gently falling on my body. I suddenly sat up, knocking over the water glass that had just been handed to me. Was I dreaming and sleeping so defenseless? No. Wasn't I already dead on the battlefield? Why is my heart still beating? The Emperor clearly pierced and shredded my heart. What's going on? Before I could sort out my thoughts and ask anything, a loud crash sounded. Yellow Hair Elder directly kicked open the door and strode into the room. He intended to step forward and scold me sternly, but was quickly stopped by Blue Hair beside him. I murmured quietly, asking myself why I was still alive. Yellow Hair Elder chimed in, saying he also found this quite miraculous. My gaze swept over the White Tower robes on his body as I ordered him to report the current situation in detail. And Yellow Hair Elder instantly became furious, angrily rebuking me for daring to order him around. Before he finished speaking, his palm came slashing toward me with fierce momentum. My heart suddenly tensed, instinctively mobilizing the magic in my body to condense a windshield to block. If his wrist got caught in the windshield's grinding force, it would snap like straw, but his palm suddenly stopped. My windshield had just formed and then disappeared. I was completely stunned. What was this useless magic all about? Yellow Hair Elder snorted coldly, saying I'd apparently put in quite a bit of secret effort. He wouldn't hold it against me for now. After Yellow Hair Elder left, Blue Hair turned and scolded me for being crazy. I ignored his questioning, secretly examining my body. Magic circuits, magic volume, even magic purity, all were absurdly poor. What had they done to my body? I urgently asked the current date, silently calculating I'd been asleep for 10 months. But Blue Hair looked completely confused, saying I'd only been unconscious for 2 days at most. He'd reported the date without mentioning the year. I still needed to get information from my disciples, so I told Blue Hair to call Purple Eyes to see me, or Yellow Eyes or Red Eyes would work too. Blue Hair's eyes widened, asking why I'd bring up the traitors, and how could I call the Tower Master by her name directly. He said Purple Eyes had long abandoned the White Tower for Red Tower, Yellow Eyes stole high-level magic books and fled. Both were traitors, and the Red Eyes I mentioned was now the White Tower Master. Moreover, the people I mentioned weren't 5-year-old children anymore. He seemed to understand, saying my memory must have completely scrambled while unconscious. I could no longer contain myself and struggled to climb out of bed. When I saw that strange young face reflected in the window, I got a huge shock. After thoroughly understanding the current situation, I was astonished to realize I'd been reborn 20 years after my death. Today's development was dazzlingly rapid. Those glowing things were called streetlights. That running iron box was a car, and this earth-shattering earth-shattering new scene was all thanks to the magic industrial revolution. The once ruined towns had long regained their vitality, but I couldn't help remembering that when extinction was imminent, people's eyes were full of despair. However, the most urgent matter now was to investigate this body's original owner's information. Following the body's residual memories, the original owner was adopted by the White Tower at age 10, now 20. Born to a fallen noble family, but was an inadequate level 1 mage, probably desperate, which is why he took the risk to misappropriate research funds to buy illegal elixirs, never expecting it would lead to death. While sorting through memories, I suddenly sensed something wrong inside my body. There was massive unrefined magic power inside. Could it really be from drinking that illegal elixir? Wait, what was this strange substance? I guided that viscous liquid to my fingertip. The moment the liquid dripped, an intense sense spread. I bent down to look closely and discovered it was actually deadly toxin. Why would there be poison in this body? I closed my eyes to ponder for a moment, already clear in my heart about what happened. That illegal elixir was genuine precious goods worth a fortune. The problem was, someone had secretly poisoned this elixir. From the residual toxin dosage and the timing of the original owner's collapse, he died from poisoning. But using such high-level deadly poison to murder a level 1 mage was too wasteful, though I didn't know who played this joke with my soul. They gave me the second life chance I most desired before death, allowing me to escape past shackles and live a selfish life thinking only of my own people. And this bizarre rebirth circumstance was really a good start for me. I decided to repay the cost of borrowing the original owner's body with revenge. Following the faint medicinal scent remaining in the bottle, I tracked all the way to a tavern in the suburbs. When I smashed up the place, a lackey reported the situation to the boss. A mage came to challenge us, asking around about who sold the elixir. The boss's face darkened as he cursed, asking who dared cause trouble on his turf. After hearing my name, the boss scoffed, saying I was just a theoretical mage who only knew paper strategies. But the lackey was still worried, mentioning the client who commissioned my death wore a White Tower ring. The boss immediately snorted in refutation, thinking they wouldn't be stupid enough to expose themselves. As he finished speaking, I kicked open the tavern door and walked in. I sneered inwardly, never expected so many people were involved in this. The boss stood up abruptly, sternly rebuking my offense. I couldn't be bothered, just signaling them to continue their previous conversation. The boss's face turned iron blue, saying if I hadn't heard he could let me go, then ordered his men to silence me. His subordinates immediately drew their blades and charged at me, while the boss waited to watch the show. My gaze turned cold. Since they were rushing to their deaths, I had no need to be polite. I shouted Windblade. A fierce windblade instantly flashed by. As the subordinate's body fell, his head also rolled to the ground. Looking at the head rolling on the ground, my heart inexplicably wavered. Of all deaths, it had to be beheading. This immediately reminded me of the Emperor's head. The boss was scared out of his wits by this sudden scene, frantically fumbling a handgun from his chest. His hand trembled as he pulled the trigger. The bullet whistled toward me. I didn't sense any magic attached to this thing, immediately activated a windshield, steadily blocking it. The boss's jaw dropped in shock. Though this gadget was quite interesting, it's better to return it to its owner. I flicked my finger and the bullet immediately returned along its path, shooting into the boss's body. The boss suddenly spat out blood and fell to the ground. I walked over and sat down in front of him, saying I'd cut off sound, don't fantasize anyone will come, then told him to honestly answer my questions and reveal who commissioned them. But the boss gritted his teeth and refused to speak. I lifted my foot and kicked his face, actually valuing pride over life. That counted as having backbone. I slightly increased the pressure under my foot, stomping hard on his nose, forcing wind into his body, instantly bloating his body. I looked down at him, advising him to tell the truth quickly or I'd make him explode. The boss's lips trembled as he begged for mercy repeatedly. I snapped my fingers to withdraw the wind, telling him to confess honestly. He gasped and said that person gave him the elixir and money, telling him to sell the elixir cheap to me. That person wore a robe hiding their appearance, with a White Tower ring on their hand. I sneered inwardly. The ring was most likely a smokescreen to deceive him. The boss suddenly remembered something, urgently adding that person had a nose-cooling fresh mint scent, nothing else known. I raised an eyebrow at him, asking if he wasn't afraid of bearing the White Tower's revenge after killing me. His eyes shifted evasively as he said the White Tower's current situation was precarious, with no mind to care about such things. I pressed about the White Tower's situation. The boss looked shocked I didn't know. I expressionlessly explained I'd lost my memory after drinking the elixir. The boss quickly apologized repeatedly, struggling to get up and fetch relevant materials. He staggered to flip out a stack of papers and put them on the table, also placing the commission fee there. I took the materials, my gaze directly locking onto entries related to the White Tower. The material stated that after the Emperor's death, a national holiday White Night Festival was established. The Emperor gave the White Tower 30 years of tax exemption to commemorate the great mages, such tremendous favor. Yet last year the White Tower still ranked last among all towers in performance. Experts pointed out the biggest problem was lack of high-level magic. The royal family stated this year's White Night Festival would announce major White Tower news. The White Tower lacking high-level magic puzzled me. Back then, to prevent this situation, situation, I'd entrusted all high-level magic materials to trusted disciples. This matter needed separate investigation. I asked the boss about the 4 major towers' recent situations. The boss quickly responded. The Eastern Yellow Tower controlled lightning and opened the Great Magic Industrial Era, aiding many epoch-making inventions like streetlights and cars. The Southern Blue Tower handled drinking water business, agricultural support, and the potion industry. The Western Red Tower, located in the scorching desert, cooperated with the military, monopolizing combat missions like subduing magic beasts. I frowned tightly, asking what the White Tower was doing now. The boss answered honestly. The White Tower handled deliveries. I complained on the spot. Deliveries? What kind of ridiculous business was this? The boss quickly explained that the White Tower's delivery workers, or windrunners, could fly in the air. Deliveries were fast and safe. I looked dumbfounded. Windrunners. What an absurd title, absolutely humiliating. I exclaimed that, in the past, White Tower mages soared across the heavens, summoning wind and rain on battlefields. That free and valiant appearance was once compared to eagles by the world. Which idiot created such a laughable business? The boss said carefully, supposedly the current White Tower master. My heart sank. That was my child. I helplessly continued asking what drinking water business and agricultural support were. How did the potion business become Blue Tower's business? The boss answered that Blue Tower was the leader in the potion market, almost monopolizing the entire market. As for drinking water and agricultural business, they sold clean water at high prices and helped with rainfall in drought areas. I looked confused. What? Clean water had to be paid for? The boss smiled, saying recently wealthy people only drank that. In summary, the White Tower's business profits fell far behind other towers. White Night Festival was its last chance to prove performance, now less than 7 months until the festival. Suddenly, the boss clutched his chest, trembling non-stop. I'd gathered about enough information. Should I save him? The ledger densely recorded accumulated evil deeds like arson, violence, illegal usury, extortion, and murder for hire. Scum whose hands were stained with filthy dealings. Still wanted me to save him? This kind of trash would be clean or dead. Leaving behind the words "next life, be a proper person," I turned and left without looking back. The White Tower at dawn had a cold air. I pushed open my room door, my steps somewhat unsteady. I couldn't help complaining. What kind of broken body was this, getting weak after just using basic magic a few times? In my current state, could I not use that magic? The unique magic that made me the greatest mage in human history. Wind archive. I tried to condense magic, but the magic scattered completely as soon as it gathered. I still needed to further understand this body's condition. While scanning magic, might as well search for more intelligence. I picked up a record book on the table, flipping through records about the original owner. The original owner was heir to an earl's family, the sole survivor of a mansion fire. He was once a genius watched by the whole nation. All towers and factions fought fiercely to claim him. Moreover, while studying at the Empire Magic Academy, he scored perfect marks on all written tests for 6 consecutive years. Papers he published independently displayed extraordinary talent without reservation. Reading this, I wondered, how could a genius still be level 1 at age 20? Just then I saw an introduction saying, if he hadn't contracted magic loss syndrome, he'd definitely have become a top mage representing this era. If that was the case, him still being level 1 made sense. Even if he understood magic better than anyone, he actually couldn't use it. Just then the scan finished. I reached out to confirm the results. After carefully checking the situation, my pupils contracted sharply. This wasn't magic loss syndrome at all. Clearly someone had secretly sabotaged him, tying up his body circuits. Magic loss syndrome, as the name suggested, was a stubborn illness that hindered normal magic circulation and accumulation. Mages could normally construct magic circuits on their 20 body circuits, with level determined by the number of magic circuits constructed. But once contracting this disease, these basic conditions all became invalid. Even spending a lifetime training, breaking through level 3 would be difficult. But the original owner's situation was different. His body circuits weren't naturally tangled together. Someone deliberately tied them into dead knots. If this kid was truly a genius, he must have realized long ago he didn't have magic loss syndrome. I stood up and walked to the bookshelf to search. If he left a diary, perhaps I could find clues. According to Bluehair's earlier statement, the original owner usually indulged in wine and women, living in a daze. But what if all this was deliberately acted out by him? Knowing someone locked his circuits and even wanted to take his life, so he deliberately acted idle. This way, falling for the illegal elixir's temptation made sense. Unable to trust anyone, he wanted to unlock the shackles by himself. I carried down a pile of books the original owner left from the shelf, spreading them all on the table. While searching, one book caught my attention, titled Reinterpreting Basic Magic. I casually flipped through a few pages, and the shock in my heart grew stronger. From Windblade's flaws to the advantages of defensive magic wind evasion, to how to improve in practical methods, all analyzed extremely thoroughly. The improved windshield the original owner proposed was quite similar to a magic concept I'd written back then. But in core concepts and underlying principles, it had essential differences from traditional pure defensive windshields. I couldn't help sighing inwardly, clearly completely unable to directly use magic, yet he simulated and tested so many things in his mind. To research basic magic to this depth, this kid's talent truly lived up to its reputation. Moreover, just from this one book, I could feel the original owner's dedication and effort toward magic. When I flipped to the end and saw that small text at the book's conclusion, I knew the truth. Turned out the original owner had long known his body's condition. But even seeing through everything, anything, he could only silently endure this torment and despair alone. I slowly stood up, emotions difficult to calm. Little Mage, who didn't yield to his own cruel fate, walking the long, lonely road. I swear in the name of the 17th White Tower Master, the shackles you couldn't unlock will be unlocked by me in your place, and the despicable ones who cruelly broke your wings, I'll make them pay the price for their sins. At some point, I'd fallen asleep. In my dream, I walked through the familiar White Tower garden. A familiar child's voice suddenly reached my ears. The past scene immediately appeared before my eyes. 3 young children gathered around me, my brow furrowed. It was that damn dream curse acting up again. The despicable means of the demon realm's nightmare baron, making me entangled by past memories every time I slept. I thought being reborn in this new body might escape this curse's torment. Seems this curse had nothing to do with the flesh, long deeply imprinted on my soul. But fortunately, the scenes of my disciples appearing in dreams hadn't twisted and distorted. That was when I taught them about the magic power system. I smiled and said magic was actually divided into 4 types: enhancement, speed, harmony, and special. Purple Eyes immediately asked if the White Tower advocated the harmony system. I answered yes, because it best suited wind magic. Red Eyes tilted her head and asked if each tower liked different systems. I patiently explained that each tower had different characteristics. Yellow Tower was speed system, Red Tower was enhancement system, Blue Tower and White Tower were representatives of the harmony system. Yellow Eyes raised his hand saying he wanted speed system. I gently told him magic power was innate and couldn't be chosen. I in the dream then squatted down, drawing a simple formula on the ground, having them each try testing their talent attributes. Red Eyes obediently closed her eyes, her little hand trembling slightly as she tried. I observed the gentle magic floating around her, smiling to tell her she was harmony system. Red Eyes immediately said happily she was the same as Master, her face full of undisguised joy. Yellow Eyes, seeing this, immediately rushed to test. Moments later, he excitedly cheered. He tested the speed system he wanted. The always silent Purple Eyes bloomed with unique flower-shaped magic aura around his body, but looked up disappointedly, asking if talent really couldn't be changed. I squatted down to gently tell him that among all mages, special system only comprised 0.2%, extremely precious. He lowered his head, saying quietly he liked harmony system and wanted to be like Master. I chuckled, saying I'd originally planned to give him the special system student the most personal guidance time. Purple Eyes suddenly looked up, eyes flashing with anticipation, asking if I'd really give him the most personal guidance. After getting confirmation, he immediately extended his small palm, wanting me to pinky promise. I stood in place watching the past scene, the corners of my mouth unconsciously forming a slight smile. Back then, everyone was still innocent children, pure and beautiful. Suddenly, a harsh broadcast pulled me from the dream back to reality. The broadcast notified me to immediately report to office 4202. I stood up and instinctively examined my body's condition, delighted. Of the original 20 knots tied to death, 12 had been untied, and as the circuits opened, I directly rose to level 2. Never thought after living so long I'd have a day of being happy about reaching level 2. Standing at the office door, I raised my hand to knock. Yellow Hair Elder saw me enter and asked if I was feeling better. I vaguely acknowledged. Looking at the mature and steady him before me, my heart was full of emotion. Yellow Hair Elder was actually once my junior. Now at 45, he'd already grown into a capable elder. Back then, he was honest and earnest, always sticking behind me, calling senior and asking questions. After I became Tower Master, he'd run around attending to me daily. Quite adorable. Thinking of this, a trace of gratified smile appeared on my face. Seeing me smile, Yellow Hair Elder's face suddenly darkened, saying he'd received death reports for Gordon family's boss and action team captain. He stared at me, his tone serious, saying the Gordon family and action team demanded full accountability. I shrugged, saying I had legitimate self-defense reasons. Those guys planned to assassinate me. Speaking, I took out the poisoned elixir and the ledger recording their assassination commission and payment. Yellow Hair Elder took the ledger to examine carefully. It not only recorded assassination details, the marked amounts also completely matched the commission fee. After reading, he pondered for a moment, saying this matter would be closed as legitimate self-defense. I thanked him and requested a private favor, saying I wanted to meet the Tower Master. Yellow Hair Elder, hearing this, said the request wasn't difficult, also mentioning I'd often discussed magic-related matters with the Tower Master before, but to meet, it would take at least half a year. I muttered inwardly. The original owner actually often discussed magic with Red Eyes, but if I had to wait half a year, White Night Festival would have already started and everything would be too late. Yellow Hair Elder explained the Tower Master was currently away, specifically handling various tricky commission cases. I couldn't help asking why such trivial matters needed the Tower Master to personally handle. Yellow Hair Elder sighed, saying the White Tower currently had no high-level mages left. I quickly asked what level the Tower Master was now. Yellow Hair Elder answered he was a level 7 high-level mage. I was even more certain I needed to find the disciple who got the materials back then and ask clearly. After chatting, I turned to take my leave. The moment I left, the White Tower Vice Master entered the office. He said he originally wanted to advise Yellow Hair Elder not to be too harsh with me, seemed he'd already taught me a lesson. The Vice Master said I was brought in by him and he'd always cared about me, also saying basic magic couldn't reach this level in a day or two. I must have put in considerable effort privately. Yellow Hair Elder, hearing this, nodded thoughtfully, saying I might be more hardworking than he imagined. The Vice Master smiled, saying that was great, then suggested going to the office for a meeting together. Meanwhile, I'd probably seen my disciples in the dream, so couldn't help coming to the garden to walk and look. A white-haired caretaker grandpa came up, enthusiastically calling my name, saying he felt sorry I'd encountered an accident and lost all my memories, also reminiscing about missing the days when I occasionally came here to chat with him. I muttered inwardly. The news of my amnesia spread too widely. To better understand the original owner's past, I went along asking if we could still chat in the future. The caretaker grandpa chuckled, thanking me for the suggestion but saying it would be difficult, because he'd soon be leaving the White Tower and not returning. I quickly asked if he'd encountered some difficulty. The caretaker sighed, saying now this department only had him left. What supported him through the long years was the previous Tower Master's speech at the inauguration ceremony. That Tower Master said in this tower, everyone was needed, so please live proudly as part of the White Tower. He said perhaps it sounded ridiculous, but from that moment on, he truly felt he was part of the White Tower and worked hard until now. I solemnly told him this wasn't ridiculous at all. I truly thought so. The caretaker grandpa's eyes reddened as he said thanks, but changed topics saying he'd decided to resign. The caretaker said I should also know the White Tower situation was very difficult now, especially doing facility management work. He could more deeply feel the tower's financial situation was far worse than before, and next month, his work tenure here would reach 40 years. I remembered those who dedicated 40 years to the tower could get enough money to buy a house in a big city. The caretaker smiled bitterly, saying the current White Tower couldn't produce so much money. To gather that amount, who knows how many people would have to risk their lives taking high-risk commissions. Thinking of this, he really couldn't feel at ease taking that money. After all, the White Tower had long been his second home. My heart was mixed. Never thought the White Tower had fallen to this extent. Before, I thought Blue Tower doing those odd jobs was degrading, but who was I to belittle that effort? At least they made quite a bit of money and were enjoying history's greatest golden age, while I left nothing behind, couldn't even pay bonuses to people who contributed 40 years to the tower. The caretaker grandpa suddenly grabbed my hand urgently, asking why I was clenching my fist so hard it was bleeding. I took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the surging guilt inside, asking when he planned to leave. The caretaker grandpa fetched a first aid kit and carefully bandaged my wound, saying he planned to leave in about 2 weeks. I told him he didn't need to leave. I had a way to solve the bonus problem. Asked him to definitely wait for me. Back in my room, I sat at the desk pondering specific feasible methods. Currently, I could think of research, lectures, accepting commissions, but receiving money from these all took too much time. With my current level 2 mage status, executing them was really too difficult. The only way to quickly achieve the goal was the potion business. I read a news article and after keenly catching the business opportunity, immediately headed to the Vice Dean's office. At this time, 2 elders and the Vice Dean were in a meeting, discussing my previous embezzlement of public funds. Finance Elder advocated severe punishment, Yellow Hair Elder advocated lenient treatment. Finance Elder retorted saying small theft leads to big theft. Yellow Hair Elder joked the White Tower was so poor. This angered Finance Elder, who immediately slapped the table saying I should be locked in seclusion cave to reflect. Yellow Hair Elder objected, saying locking a level 1 rookie in wouldn't produce results. The Vice Master also quickly agreed, saying seclusion punishment was indeed too severe. He proposed instead imposing triple compensation for privately misappropriating research funds, showing punishment while being reasonable. Finance Elder sighed heavily, saying the Vice Master's punishment was too light. But thinking again, the White Tower was already running at a deficit. What right did we have to demand high compensation from mages? Moreover, half the facilities were idle with hardly any revenue sources. Even selling all the potion manufacturing room's equipment could barely scrape together 3 months' living expenses. The Vice Master immediately firmly opposed, saying we absolutely couldn't sell equipment for money. His tone was solemn, saying this was where mages gathered to bloom new truths. We couldn't sell the White Tower's future just to fill our stomachs now. Finance Elder mocked what future already waited 20 years. Yellow Hair Elder, seeing this, sternly stopped her negative talk. But Finance Elder retorted that even if there was a peerless genius who could save the tower, they wouldn't choose the declining White Tower in the end. She advised Yellow Hair Elder and Vice Master to face reality and abandon those illusory fantasies. Properly considering how to earn money to survive was the priority. Just then, I knocked on the door. After getting the Vice Master's permission, I pushed the door open and greeted everyone. The Vice Master spoke first, asking what I wanted coming in at this time. I said I had a proposal and wanted everyone to let me be responsible for a business. Finance Elder immediately mocked, saying how funny I was. Had I forgotten I just embezzled research funds a few days ago, yet dared to say I wanted to do business? I ignored her questioning, saying to recover my memory. I'd browsed previous newspapers and found Bin's territory broke out with serious flu and issued a lockdown order. The Vice Master said he'd also seen this news. If the situation was true, it would be terrible. The reason it was tricky was because this flu currently had no effective treatment. In the past, the White Tower could develop vaccines, but the formula was lost 20 years ago. I nodded in confirmation, saying even Blue Tower, which monopolized the potion market, was helpless, so I plan to start from here. Restart the vaccine business the White Tower once exclusively sold, earning revenue for the tower by selling Cardena flu vaccine. Finance Elder scoffed, stating outright this proposal had zero value worth hearing. The tower and major pharmaceutical companies invested massive funds in high-level mages for 20 years without creating a vaccine. A 20-year-old brat like me absolutely couldn't do it. I didn't deny they all failed, also admitted I was indeed 20 years old. But changing my tone, I solemnly said I was a genius with full confidence I could create the vaccine, begging everyone to invest in me. Finance Elder exploded on the spot, asking what joke I was making, then calculated an account. My 17 research fund applications totaled 800,000 pebi, plus some embezzled to buy illegal elixirs. She grew more agitated, mocking that I was a pampered young master who didn't understand money concepts, yet dared boast about being a genius. The vice master spoke up to stop her, saying I was submitting a formal investment proposal as a White Tower mage. Finance Elder as an elder was being too rude in words and actions. Finance Elder then reluctantly apologized. Understanding the context, I finally understood why she was so hostile toward me. Over 10 years, the original owner hadn't produced half a decent research result, yet consumed such enormous funds. As the finance managing elder, accumulated resentment was understandable. But I ultimately wasn't the original owner, and my abilities weren't just theoretical. The vice master looked at me, asking why I was certain what broke out in Bin's territory was Cardena flu. I told them there was, of course, solid evidence, having everyone turn to the newspaper's second page. It recorded that the Archbishop of Altair Church suddenly changed his itinerary during pilgrimage to stay in a remote small place for a month, holding blessing prayers. This action was too abnormal, and Altair Church worshipped the Earth Mother. The 7 archbishops appeared to be clean religious leaders, but were completely opposite. An archbishop wanting to reach the church's cardinal archbishop position needed massive election funds. Their true purpose for pilgrimage stops was meeting local nobles and merchants to collect offerings. But that remote small town was poor and backward, couldn't squeeze out much profit. Yellow Hair Elder interjected, saying the church claimed it was for blessing prayers. I asked back, that was even stranger. Why give land with no profit such costly blessing prayers? Moreover, Altair Church's pilgrimage route was always fixed, rarely changing temporarily. This clearly was trying to delay reaching Bin's territory as much as possible. You should know, if the church encountered accidents or major disasters during pilgrimage, it would be seen as angering the Earth Mother. For an archbishop wholeheartedly wanting to run for cardinal, this was tantamount to political death sentence. Yellow Hair Elder instantly realized, saying this meant the archbishop already knew Bin's broke out with Cardena flu, so deliberately delayed time. Finance Elder nodded, admitting my analysis hit the mark, worthy of a top theoretical mage, but also emphasized this was ultimately just my hypothesis. The vice master admitted he could understand my assertion and confidence, but very sorry, he couldn't provide official level support. After all, if this special fund was approved, other mages would completely lose activity funds. That said, he expressed willingness to personally invest in me. Finance Elder immediately got anxious, about to speak to dissuade, but was interrupted by the vice master raising his hand. The vice master said he only had 30,000 pebi, asking if this little money could really create a vaccine. I shouted internally, too little, far from the original plan. Then I headed straight to the potion manufacturing room. Looking at the long idle equipment inside, I quickly thought of plan B. First use this 30,000 PB to make a vaccine sample, then take the sample to find that archbishop to get follow-up funding. Whoever's most anxious, collect money from them. After all, the person currently most troubled by Cardena flu was him. Alright, first find the feel for developing potions back then. I concentrated on handling the medicinal ingredients. The familiar operation feel quickly came back. They say levels are temporary, but skill is eternal. Those words were absolutely right. I also casually mixed up a bottle of fatigue recovery potion. Hurried footsteps approached. Blue Hair came in carrying several large bags of medicinal materials, panting heavily. As soon as he entered, he asked if I had anything to quench his thirst. I handed him the fatigue recovery potion I'd just made. Blue Hair grabbed the bottle and drank it all, exclaiming it tasted great and worked wonders. I checked the materials he'd bought back. The quality was excellent. Blue Hair looked quite proud, saying if the White Tower really went under, he'd just go back to being a merchant. Before he finished speaking, I reached out and tapped his head. I explained I acted without thinking. Blame him for talking nonsense. Blue Hair covered his head and muttered, saying the finance elder sent him to help, asking what we needed to do now. So the finance elder was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. I picked up a bundle of materials, telling him to move them to the operating table first. The original owner's diary made it very clear. The White Tower was full of talented but problematic kids like loose screws. As long as they could regain their spirits, they'd definitely become important forces for the tower. Blue Hair in front of me was one of these problem children. Since he was curious about these toxic herbs anyway, might as well strike while the iron's hot and test his abilities. Blue Hair put down the heavy material bag, frowning as he said black belt orchid, crimson mountain tree flower, ghost mushroom, mist tear flower leaves. These were all dangerous toxic herbs difficult to handle. According to traditional methods, you'd have to boil these herbs in water for 12 hours to remove the toxins. I immediately pointed out that during the boiling process, toxins would be lost along with beneficial components in the materials. I casually asked Blue Blue Hair if he'd heard of Sea Country's buns. Using a steamer to remove toxins could cook the materials while maximizing preservation of effective components. Blue Hair shouted excitedly that it was a great method. I explained the steamer only softened the materials to a state where toxins could be removed. The real detoxification still needed us mages to complete. I raised my hand to release vacuum condensation magic, signaling Blue Hair to watch my movements carefully, how I separated the toxicity from the steam alone, which two types of magic I activated, and what ratio I used to stir the material liquid to complete the potion preparation. I held up the finished potion, asking him to try it too. Blue Hair looked troubled, saying it only looked simple. I watched his somewhat clumsy magic condensation process. Starting from vacuum condensation, his magic control was slightly unstable. Not long after, Blue Hair stopped, admitting he couldn't control two types of magic simultaneously. I smiled slightly, telling him I'd teach him. Actually, once you understood the principle, it wasn't that difficult. I told him to try imagining setting up a partition in his mind. Use a magic on the left, be magic on the right. Blue Hair dubiously closed his eyes and tried the method I described. Moments later, two different magic powers stably appeared before him. I nodded and congratulated him on comprehending dual casting. Listening to Blue Hair say, why wouldn't the seniors just teach such simple things? I thought to myself, many people didn't want to freely pass on techniques they'd worked hard to comprehend to juniors. But on that blood-soaked battlefield back then, maintaining such selfish conventions was impossible. To survive, everyone shared secret techniques daily and discussed tactics together. What the White Tower needed most now was precisely this kind of active education model and open knowledge exchange atmosphere. Pulling back my thoughts, I praised Blue Hair for his talent, succeeding on the first try. Blue Hair scratched his head embarrassedly, saying I explained it clearly and simply. I pointed to the materials piled in the corner, telling him to continue. I also suggested with a smile using a large steamer to steam everything at once. Efficiency would improve considerably. Several hours later, Blue Hair complained he was nearly exhausted. I was seriously counting the neatly arranged potion bottles on the table. Just then, Yellow Hair Elder rushed in urgently, saying something major had happened. Blue Tower and the pharmaceutical company were already meeting with the Archbishop. Yellow Hair Elder looked worried, afraid they'd sign a treatment contract with the Archbishop first. Blue Hair instantly panicked, shouting urgently that all the treatment we made would be useless then. Yellow Hair Elder sighed, patting Blue Hair's shoulder to comfort him. But I shook my head, my gaze determined as I said it wasn't over yet. Cardena flu was classified as a Class B dangerous disaster, and being such, there was still one method worth trying. The scene shifted to a luxurious mansion. The Archbishop sat in the main seat, solemnly signaling attendants to bring in the guests. Blue Tower's subordinate and the pharmaceutical company's director entered side by side, respectfully greeting the Archbishop. After the attendant seated them both, he left. The Archbishop got straight to the point, asking about progress on manufacturing the flu treatment. Blue Tower's subordinate said confidently it was going smoothly. The Archbishop's face showed pleasure, asking when it could be completed. Blue Tower's subordinate added that after passing experiments and getting approval from the Empire Food and Drug Administration, they could mass produce. But clinical trials couldn't be finished in a day or two. The Archbishop's expression changed slightly, saying he didn't have that much time to wait. Blue Tower's subordinate quickly promised to complete all approval processes as soon as possible. Just then, the attendant knocked again, saying another guest was requesting an audience. The Archbishop frowned, asking why no one had reported there was another visitor in advance. Blue Tower's subordinate and the director exchanged confused glances. I pushed the door open directly, nodding to everyone present in greeting, then briefly introduced myself, stating I came to notify everyone of important good news. The Archbishop paused, asking what good news the White Tower had. I said I came to sell Cardena flu treatment. The Archbishop smiled, saying the timing was quite coincidental. He also joked that Blue Tower hadn't prepared for the deal. I immediately responded that the White Tower was already prepared for the deal right now. Blue Tower's subordinate shot to his feet, sharply refuting that the White Tower had neither funds nor technology to make flu treatment. The Archbishop looked at me, his tone scrutinizing, asking if I really brought the treatment. I took out a wooden box from my chest and placed it on the table, saying this was a treatment sample. As long as we completed the deal, hundreds of thousands of doses could be prepared within a week. Blue Tower's subordinate got anxious, turning to question whether this treatment had obtained approval certification from the Empire Food and Drug Administration. I honestly answered no. He seemed to have found a handle, telling the Archbishop not to believe my nonsense, boasting that Blue Tower had a long history and cooperated with top pharmaceutical companies so they could make excellent potions. I sneered that Blue Tower dared claim long history before the White Tower. How audacious. Blue Tower's subordinate's face darkened, sternly telling me to take back those words. I asked him in return, wasn't the first tower in continental history precisely the White Tower? He snorted disdainfully, saying we were only 5 years earlier than Blue Tower, yet still showed off. My tone suddenly turned cold, telling him those short 5 years were heights that generations of Blue Tower masters could never reach, even spending their entire lives. A chasm they could never cross even after thousands or millions of years. That was irreplaceable historical accumulation. Blue Tower's subordinate still looked disdainful. I asked him back, had he forgotten that 20 years ago, the White Tower monopolized the potion market? Blue Tower's subordinate said in humiliated fury, why bring up past events no one remembered anymore? Hearing this, an astonishing magic pressure suddenly emanated from my body, making everyone present's hearts skip a beat. I thought the timing was about right, and sure enough, the attendant burst into the room holding a phone. The attendant bowed apologetically, reporting the Archbishop had received an urgent call. After the Archbishop answered, Lord Binz's excited voice of gratitude immediately came through. The Archbishop paused, asking what he was thanking him for. Lord Binz said he was thanking the Archbishop for sending the Cardina flu treatment, also saying a White Tower elder said this was secretly prepared by the Archbishop and the White Tower, and to thank the Archbishop's generosity. He excitedly said patients who received the treatment miraculously recovered in just a few hours. The Archbishop understood in his heart, his face showing a smile, asking if there were side effects. Lord Binz answered there weren't any, asking when they could receive the second batch of medicine, specifically mentioning the White Tower elder said this matter had to be decided by the Archbishop. The Archbishop glanced at me, then told Lord Binz the second batch would be sent immediately once prepared. After the Archbishop hung up, I calmly admitted this was all my arrangement. Blue Tower's subordinate urgently told the Archbishop this clearly violated Empire food law, begging the Archbishop to punish me. I looked at Blue Tower's subordinate, saying they didn't understand the law at all, asking if he knew about war law. Blue Tower's subordinate was furious, telling me not to deliberately change the subject. Why was I suddenly bringing up war law? I calmly explained that in past wars with the demon race, what actually took the most lives was the plague that spread after the war. Mages quickly created treatments then, but waiting for food law approval took too long, and countless people died as a result. His Majesty couldn't bear it, and added to war law that special treatments weren't bound by Empire food law. Blue Tower subordinate immediately refuted, saying I was lying, emphasizing we weren't in wartime now. I patiently explained further that being recognized as wartime fell into three categories. First was officially declaring war with other races or nations. Second was rebellion occurring within the Empire. And finally, third was disasters occurring at danger level B or above. And Cardina flu happened to be a class B large to scale natural disaster. The pharmaceutical director broke out in sweat, saying they could also immediately send treatment to Bin's territory. The Archbishop impatiently scolded them for not understanding the situation. This duel ended the moment White Tower's treatment reached Bin's territory. Moreover, Lord Binz already believed he and the White Tower jointly bestowed grace. The pharmaceutical director urgently said they could drastically reduce prices, begging the Archbishop to reconsider. The Archbishop roared angrily, rebuking them for thinking they could buy his face with that little money. Both turned pale with fright, hurriedly bowing to apologize. The Archbishop sternly scolded that it was enough, ordering them to leave immediately. As Blue Tower's subordinate passed by me, he said he'd settle this debt sooner or later. I smiled and told him the patent for Cardina flu treatment and vaccine had already been registered with the royal family in advance. If they wanted to sell the treatment they'd already made, they'd have to obediently pay patent fees to the White Tower, or destroy everything if unwilling. Blue Tower's subordinate clenched his fists but ultimately didn't dare say another word, leaving indignantly. The pharmaceutical director stood up, politely bidding farewell to the Archbishop. As he passed by me, we both politely nodded to each other. Just then, I keenly caught a whiff of scent. It was a crisp mint fragrance. I whipped my head around. The tavern owner's testimony instantly flashed through my mind. That person emanated a refreshing mint scent that made your nose feel cool. Could he have secretly poisoned and killed the original owner? But before I could detain him, the pharmaceutical director had already walked out the door. The Archbishop smiled and gestured for me to take the opposite seat, then got straight to business, saying since the cooperation intention was set, let's start with price. Asking what I planned to charge, also mentioning Blue Tower's offer just now, was 2 million PB. I pondered for a moment, saying we wanted 5 million. The Archbishop's pupils contracted sharply, asking in shock if I was serious. Several hours later, I returned to the White Tower. The finance elder stared at the check, her eyes going straight. She counted several times before daring to confirm the amount was actually 10 million PB. She excitedly hugged me, her tone intimate like a completely different person. The Vice Tower Master also couldn't hide his surprise. After all, the Archbishop would never easily pay such an astronomical price for one batch of treatment. I looked at everyone, a smile forming at the corners of my mouth, saying we hadn't calculated a publicity fee yet. Everyone looked puzzled, waiting for me to continue explaining. I went on to explain that the White Tower would announce publicly that he received divine inspiration, foresaw the Cardina flu, and specifically ordered the White Tower to prepare treatment. For him coveting the next Cardinal Archbishop position, there was simply no reason to refuse, and he was extremely satisfied with this setup, ultimately signing the contract at 10 million PB, double my initial asking price. The Vice Tower Master looked at the huge check on the table, deciding to withdraw my punishment, asking if anyone present had objections. Everyone shook their heads, indicating no objections. The Vice Tower Master turned to me, saying, if I needed any support, just speak up. I said we needed to recruit mages at level 4 or above, the more the better. The Vice Tower Master immediately decided on public recruitment, with me in charge of selecting participants, also having the finance elder immediately post recruitment information inside the tower. He also added recruitment conditions. The potion manufacturing room would give participants generous daily wages and provide 3 meals with meat daily. Such generous conditions instantly attracted many mages to come. I clapped my hands, wanting everyone to quiet down, but the scene remained noisy, no one willing to listen. My fingertip moved slightly, casting a silent silencing spell. Instantly, the clamor in the manufacturing room stopped abruptly. I told everyone that today, I'd gathered them to mass-produce Cardina vaccine and treatment and needed the seniors' help. Whispers immediately spread through the crowd. Some were surprised the recruiter was me, the famously problematic genius. Some wondered what could make me lower myself. Others questioned how I could understand pharmacy, suspecting I was running another scam, saying I'd squandered so much research funding before, and now suddenly wanted to do real work. They didn't believe it. I turned to Blue Hair beside me, quietly asking if those people seemed to really dislike me. Blue Hair scratched his head and honestly said, I used to be arrogant and annoying, squandering the tower's research budget without producing decent results, just drinking all day. Though you apparently worked hard in private, everyone's impression was already fixed. Just then, a blonde beauty walked out from the crowd, saying the White Tower's pharmacy formulas were lost 20 years ago. I answered I'd successfully restored the formulas. Everyone instantly erupted in discussion, saying I'd swallowed so much research funding and actually produced results. The blonde beauty continued questioning, had the treatment's effects been verified? I answered the first batch of treatment had already taken effect in Bin's territory and we'd completed the contract with Altair Church. The blonde beauty's gaze sharpened, saying this way the formula must be priceless, questioning how I dared share such precious technology with them. I looked straight into her eyes, my tone calm, saying I didn't understand why the seniors still stayed at the White Tower. The blonde beauty was very displeased after hearing this, finding my attitude terrible. She turned to leave, saying as she walked that though she didn't know what this great genius's ulterior motive was in saying such things, no one here wanted to hear such nonsense. I changed my tone, saying I knew what the seniors had given up for the White Tower. Hearing this, the blonde beauty's steps paused as she slowly turned around. I called out everyone's names and passed one by one. The blonde beauty was a level 5 mage who, due to unique pharmacy talent and leadership, was recruited by Red Tower and multiple top companies 7 times, all refused. Another level 5 mage, proficient in Royal Certified Magic Combat Arts, was invited to be an exclusive Royal Palace mage, but ultimately declined this proposal. Another level 5 mage, the Empire Magic Academy had extended olive branches for instructor positions 4 times, all firmly rejected by him. And a level 4 mage, Yellow Tower repeatedly tried to recruit her for her creative alchemy, but ultimately failed. I looked around the room, saying, besides those seniors named, everyone else present must have received similar generous invitations. If it were me facing such tempting conditions, I might have been unable to resist long ago, but the seniors never left. Now the White Tower was facing its most severe winter, in a situation where we couldn't even pay employee bonuses. Though you could all go to warmer, richer places, you still chose to stay in this bitter cold. If I can't even trust people as sincere as you, then who can I trust? I said with feigned helplessness that if the seniors wouldn't help, there was really no other way. Only Blue Hair and I, 2 magic rookies, could grit our teeth and desperately rush production. After speaking, I called Blue Hair and turned to walk into the laboratory. The blonde beauty also followed in, asking if we should put on goggles first. When I looked up again, all the seniors had come to the laboratory. I looked at everyone and added, let me make this clear in advance. Today's menu isn't pork. Just as disappointed expressions appeared on everyone's faces, I immediately said it was beef, and the scene instantly erupted in cheers. Just like that, with everyone working together, vaccine and treatment production kept climbing, ultimately creating an astounding achievement of breaking through the target value by 140%. A week later, I came to the Sky Garden, looking at the flower petals arranged on the ground, must be left by Grandpa the caretaker, thinking I should give him a proper greeting next time I see him. Then I picked up the newspaper beside me and read carefully. One news item said that shortly after Bin's territory distributed Cardina flu treatment, the flu was officially declared over, also saying the White Tower had fired a resurrection signal flare. Another news item said I was nominated for this year's Empire Peace Prize and the Archbishop. Approval rating was soaring nationwide. Putting down the newspaper, I thought to myself that everything was proceeding smoothly according to plan. Just then, Blue Hair rushed in saying vaccine reservation orders were exploding. Regions and even the royal family had sent reservation requests. Just fulfilling these orders could easily earn tens of millions of PB. Blue Hair calmly analyzed that this boom should fade quickly. I nodded, saying anyway we'd first solve the White Tower's urgent problems, also teasing him for being smarter than he looked. Then I smiled mysteriously, saying not to worry because I'd long prepared recovery potions that were always in demand. Blue Hair's eyes widened, praising my meticulous thinking, also asking curiously if it was the legendary potion, Star's Tear, the most famous of White Tower's recovery potions, a miracle potion that could bring people back from death. Once on the market, it would definitely trigger crazy competition from all forces. Even if we could make it now, the manufacturing method would be snatched by those hyena-like forces. This time we were safe only because the Archbishop acted as our shield. We needed to strengthen the White Tower's own power first, before considering releasing higher-level potions. Taking this opportunity, I asked Blue Hair to purchase a batch of materials, but Blue Hair complained the herbs on the list were hard to find. I was surprised these were all very common specialties, but Blue Hair helplessly said the corresponding herb fields had long been completely abandoned, due to lack of care. I immediately took Blue Hair onto a carriage, heading straight to the wilderness in the outskirts. Arriving at the destination, Blue Hair complained if I was sick, insisting on climbing up to a place even carriages couldn't enter. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, telling him to hang on a bit longer, saying if we walked another 10 miles we should reach the old herb field site. Blue Hair looked confused, asking why I was using units abolished 18 years ago. He looked me up and down, saying I'd been acting strange since earlier. After the war ended, the Empire had long unified to use meters. Even the weight unit pounds was changed to grams, guessing I'd looked at too many ancient texts while restoring formulas and mixed up the units. Just then, we reached a wooden cabin. Blue Hair politely knocked on the door. A white-haired old man opened the door, his gaze sweeping back and forth over us. A sudden engine roar came. Several small cars drove up the rugged mountain road. After the cars stopped, the lead businessman leaned out, loudly asking the old man if he planned to sell the land today. The old man's face darkened as he stepped out the door, firmly stating he absolutely wouldn't sell. The businessman scoffed, telling the old man to drop the stubbornness. The compensation he was offering was 10 times more than other plots. His subordinate also chimed in, saying the old man should know when to stop playing hard to get, or he'd annoy people. The old man glared at them angrily, saying what a joke. As long as he still had breath, he'd absolutely never allow a factory to be built here. The businessman was unconcerned, saying if the old man kicked the bucket someday, the land would still have no one managing, advising him to sell and enjoy his twilight years with the money. Once factories surrounded the area, the land value would plummet. The old man sharply retorted that even if he wasn't around, the businessman could forget about buying this land. The businessman's expression turned ugly after hearing this. He snorted coldly and ordered his subordinates to retreat. Before leaving, the businessman seemed to suddenly remember something, saying, "Oh right. On the way here, they seem to have trampled quite a few herbs." He pulled out a wad of cash from his chest, casually threw it on the ground. The businessman said this was compensation for the herbs, then got in the car and drove off. In the car, the businessman wondered suspiciously why a White Tower mage would appear here. A subordinate quickly handed him a newspaper, guessing they came for the herbs, also mentioning the White Tower made a fortune this time with the vaccine. After the businessman saw the content, he instantly flew into a rage, cursing his subordinate as a bastard, questioning why he only mentioned this now. He worried the old man would take the White Tower as his backing. That way he could hold out for several more years refusing to sell, and he himself couldn't even repay the bank loan. A vicious glint flashed in the businessman's eyes, saying he'd contacted a mercenary group before to commission them to act tonight. The subordinate hesitantly reminded that the old man was a state-designated cultural heritage protection subject. But the businessman interrupted him, saying he had connections. Kill the old man and end it as a disappearance, then acquire that ownerless land cheaply. The subordinate was still worried. What if the White Tower mage kept guarding the herb field involving the 4 major towers would be hard to resolve? But the businessman sneered disdainfully, saying kill anyone who got in the way, also mocking that the White Tower was long finished. That night, Blue Hair and I lay on the grass watching stars. Blue Hair remarked the herb-gathering old man was really a good person. I nodded in agreement, my mind floating back to the daytime conversation. The old man said it was late and going down the mountain was too dangerous, proactively offering us lodging. He also told us the businessman was frantically buying up land in this area. Now, except for his small plot, the surroundings had all been swallowed up. Many herb gatherers either were forced to leave or disappeared mysteriously. I couldn't help asking how he'd held on until now. The old man explained he was a cultural heritage herb grower and had been under special protection from the imperial family, barely holding on until now. I continued asking. Selling the land would clearly bring huge wealth, so why did he insist on holding on here so stubbornly? The old man turned to look out the window at the herb field, his gaze incredibly determined, saying, "Kid, isn't this obvious? Because he deeply loved this land. From birth to future burial, this would always be his homeland." The memory faded. I couldn't help feeling emotional. People as pure as the old man were rare. Even the way he shyly rushed into the house seemed especially endearing. Blue Hair's voice interrupted my reminiscence. I turned to ask what he envied. Blue Hair said he just wanted to know what it felt like to live a life shining like the stars, also joking that a genius like me definitely couldn't understand ordinary people's yearnings. I looked at him seriously, telling him he was actually also excellent. Blue Hair paused, then smiled, saying even if it was just courtesy, he appreciated it. I shook my head, saying it wasn't courtesy. After all, I wasn't good at saying these things anyway. Looking at the starry sky, I said softly that in the past, even the city's center could see stars this bright. Blue Hair complained about me, saying the past I spoke of was how long ago. He reminded me I was even younger than him. I smiled slightly, not responding further. Suddenly, I keenly sensed something amiss. Blue Hair was startled by my tense expression, asking if I'd seen a ghost. Even Blue Hair with his high magic perception level hadn't noticed. Seemed the visitors weren't friendly. quietly. My gaze sharply looked toward the dark depths, saying it wasn't ghosts but people, 4 of them. Meanwhile, the mercenary group members were rapidly approaching the cabin. Green Hair's voice carried amusement, asking why White Hair, who was scared last time and refused to come, was here. White Hair coldly responded that when the patron pays, you follow orders. Reaching near the cabin, White Hair barked that chatter ended here. Red Hair, the leader, quietly reminded there might be mages accompanying them. Green Hair excitedly rubbed his hands, saying he'd long wanted to try fighting a mage. He then volunteered to scout ahead first. Green Hair quietly pried open the door, pushing it open to find complete darkness inside. He tiptoed to the bedside, only hearing slight breathing sounds. But the next second, he sensed something wrong and frantically ran toward the door. I watched his fleeing figure, silently admiring his quick reaction. My fingertip instantly condensed pale cyan magic, casting Wind Bullet. A high-speed air current shot through the air, directly piercing Green Hair's head. I thought to myself this Wind Bullet technique was really useful. An improved technique from the original owners, reinterpreting basic magic, reconstructing gun principles with White Tower magic. The lethality was stronger than imagined. Then I got up from the bed, pushed open the door, and walked out of the cabin. My gaze swept over the shadows outside the door, my heart tightening slightly. Originally 3 should remain, why only 2 left? Red Hair's face darkened, asking what I did to Green Hair. My tone was flat as I said that guy was sleeping inside, just that he'd never wake up. Red Hair wasn't provoked, instead demanding I hand over the herb gatherer's hiding place. I deliberately showed a mocking smile, my tone flippant, saying if he wanted the person, find them himself. This completely enraged Red Hair. He sternly ordered White Hair to kill me. White Hair drew his blade and slashed at me, the blade carrying fierce wind, but it was blocked by an invisible barrier a meter from my body. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't cut through even a fraction. I kicked off the ground, my form shooting out of the barrier like an arrow to relocate. A flash of surprise crossed White Hair's eyes, clearly not expecting my speed to be this fast. He immediately flipped his blade handle, wielding his strangely shaped weapon, attacking all my vital points, claiming this was my end. I condensed several wind bullets at my fingertips. With tearing air sounds, they shot straight toward White Hair's heart. He hastily crossed his weapons to block. With a crisp clang, the blades were knocked away. The clothes on his chest were shredded by the airflow, revealing deep, bloody gashes. Just as I was about to complain, his strength was more boring than expected. Suddenly, a deadly sense of crisis struck. I instinctively rolled sideways, barely dodging a whistling black shadow. White Hair saw me dodging awkwardly and immediately mocked, asking if I was scared. The next second, a bullet precisely hit his forehead. The shock in White Hair's eyes hadn't faded when his body fell straight down. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief within the wind defense layer. That was really close just now. The bullet barely grazed past my cheek, and the shooter was Red Hair. He was now toying with the gun in his hand, his tone tinged with regret, saying it was unfortunate he hit the wrong person. If I hadn't dodged that shot earlier, it would have sent me to the afterlife. I raised an eyebrow, asking back why he didn't avoid White Hair. Wasn't he his comrade? Red Hair's tone was indifferent, saying accurately speaking he was a subordinate. If he died, just hire another. He waved the gun in his hand, asking if I knew what this toy was. I looked over the strangely shaped mechanism, pointing out it had 3 magic enhancements: acceleration, reinforcement, and penetration. Red Hair put away his contempt, saying though I was arrogant, I indeed had the ability to say such things. Then he extended an olive branch, inviting me to work together, promising the pay would definitely be generous. I refused without hesitation, even jokingly mocking that following him, the back of my head would hurt a lot. Red Hair's gaze suddenly turned cold, saying in that case, no need to waste more breath. The gun in his hand aimed at me again, firing violently. I hurriedly dodged the dense hail of bullets. Direct confrontation was clearly disadvantageous, and my magic was only half remaining. Continuing to run wasn't a solution either. I quickly analyzed that guy's only weakness was the loading time. After 2 shots, he had to reload, creating a brief ceasefire. I knew he had 1 bullet left. To end the battle, I could only take a risk. Taking a deep breath, I urged all remaining magic in my body to accelerate at full power, then suddenly charged forward. Red Hair turned his head, a flash of surprise in his eyes. His reaction was extremely fast. He immediately raised the gun to aim at me. Without hesitation, pulled the trigger. The bullet whistled out. At the critical moment, I deployed a special windshield. Red Hair was originally confident, but his expression changed drastically when he saw the bullet deflected by the windshield. He roared in disbelief. How could a mere human possibly dodge gunfire? I didn't give him much reaction time, my fingertip rapidly condensing magic, taking advantage of his daze to fiercely close in. Red Hair hastily lowered his head to reload. Just as he finished loading the new bullet, my fully condensed wind bullet had already fired, precisely and accurately shooting through his forehead. Red Hair died with a face full of unwillingness and shock, looking at Red Hair's fallen corpse. I bent down to pick up the gun that had fallen to the ground. This weapon deserved praise. It gave me quite a hard time. If I hadn't applied friction reduction and durability enhancement magic to the windshield in advance, making the shield surface soft and interior hard, the one lying on the ground right now would probably be me. After returning to the White Tower, I must thoroughly research countermeasures for the latest weaponized magic. The urgent priority now was to quickly reach Blue Hair and the old man. I silently prayed in my heart they wouldn't be caught by the fourth person. However, Blue Hair and the old man in the forest were still discovered by assassin Black Hair. Blue Hair protected the old man behind him, his tone firm, telling him to go first. Blue Hair patted his chest, saying his abilities weren't weak, he could handle this completely. Taking the old man along would tie his hands and prevent him from fighting at ease, telling the old man to find a safe place to hide first. He'd follow after dealing with the enemy. The old man hesitated, repeatedly instructing Blue Hair to be careful, then turned and hurried away. Black Hair, seeing this, let out piercing mockery, saying this kind lie nearly made his eyes moist. He drew a long sword from his waist, suddenly leapt up. Blue Hair immediately activated his magic skill, Windblade. A fierce windblade wrapped in powerful wind slashed straight out. Black Hair easily split the windblade with his sword, his tone disdainful, saying Blue Hair was too weak. Then he drew a short sword, directly stabbing at Blue Hair's heart. But the short sword actually passed straight through Blue Hair's body. Black Hair paused, feeling something was off. Just as he was stunned, Blue Hair suddenly reached out and grabbed the short sword's blade. His other fist charged and swung out, fiercely smashing into his face. Black Hair fell to the ground in disbelief, completely lifeless. Blue Hair withdrew his fist, his tone flat, saying, "Sorry, he had a special constitution." When I arrived at the scene, I witnessed Black Hair's death. That's when I realized Blue Hair was a special type mage. He'd even inherited the unique ability of the 7th special type Tower Master, Windwalker. Unless someone knew advanced magic, they couldn't possibly counter this overpowered skill. Even I had only seen this rare magic in ancient texts. I walked up to Blue Hair, and he seemed startled. He asked when I'd arrived. I said I'd just gotten there, told him I was worried at first, but now it seemed unnecessary. Blue Hair smiled, then looked around searching for the old man. I reassured him, saying I'd already sensed the old man's presence. By sunrise, the three of us returned to the cabin, and the old man kept bowing in gratitude. Blue Hair scratched his head awkwardly, saying he didn't do much. It was mainly my achievement. I shook my head, saying without Blue Hair taking down the swordsman, the consequences would have been dire. Blue Hair said somewhat embarrassedly, "Well, it's all over now, right?" The old man sighed, saying if the businessman's assassination failed, he'd definitely find another way, because his herb field was the largest and right in the prime center location. For years, the magic industry manufacturing plants had been dumping waste and pollutants daily, contaminating the surrounding land. If the businessman built another factory here, it wouldn't be long before the herb fields were truly ruined. I asked him about the duty to the White Tower he mentioned. Was it an agreement with the fourth Tower Master? A flash of surprise crossed the old man's eyes. He said he was shocked I knew about this. I explained that long ago, people's perception of herb gatherers was completely different from today. Back then, herb gatherers were treated like witches. Everyone avoided them, and some would arrest them without question. Because herb gatherers would boil unknown herbs in pots and sell them, ordinary people couldn't understand this behavior, so they were labeled as witchcraft practitioners. To escape judgment, herb gatherers had to live nomadic, wandering lives. When they were desperate with nowhere to turn, the White Tower benefactor appeared and took them in. I said I'd read about it in a fairy tale book, but actually I'd read it in ancient texts passed down only among Tower Masters. The old man's face showed a gratified smile, saying that after that, herb gatherers from across the continent gathered here. For the first time, they had a peaceful, comfortable home. The White Tower gave their ancestors a homeland and dignity, so of course they couldn't betray the White Tower. I stood up and bowed deeply to the old man, thanking him for his years of dedication and hardship. I also said that if the royal family learned a cultural heritage site was under attack, they'd immediately intervene. The old man looked worried, saying the royal family was cautious but slow. They probably couldn't help in time. I smiled to reassure him, saying the royal family would move faster than light. I thought to myself, because today was the day the White Tower and the royal family signed the contract for the Cardena flu treatment. That afternoon, the businessman was frantically packing in his office with his subordinates. While everyone was busy, a group of uniformed people suddenly burst in. The leader flashed his badge, identifying himself as the chief inspector of the Empire's Internal Affairs Security Bureau. He then presented an arrest warrant. The businessman's face turned pale, asking why the Security Bureau chief was here. The chief inspector stared at him coldly, saying he was being arrested on multiple charges including conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, illegal property acquisition, and destruction of cultural heritage. The businessman panicked, claiming he wanted to smoke before leaving, trying to stall for time. The chief inspector glanced at him without speaking, ordering the officers to drag him away. The businessman struggled and shouted, asking if they knew who his backer was. The chief inspector sneered, asking if his backer was higher than His Majesty. The businessman was instantly speechless, his face turning from white to green. The chief inspector snatched the cigarette from him, telling him to get moving. An officer couldn't help asking the chief inspector, who exactly was I, to make them mobilize so urgently in one day? This was his first time encountering such a situation. The chief inspector flicked the cigarette ash flash, saying it was a direct order from His Majesty. The officer looked confused. The chief inspector didn't want to explain further, saying kids shouldn't ask about adult matters, but he privately wondered why His Majesty favored the White Tower so much. The White Tower had indeed achieved great feats, but that was 20 years ago. Even if you lift a bird with broken wings high, you only change how fast it falls. The White Tower no longer had the ability or qualifications to enjoy such treatment. So what kind of existence was the White Tower during the war when humanity defeated the demon race and gained true liberation? That made those in high positions remember it even now, still unable to let go of their expectations for it. Putting aside his thoughts, the chief inspector ordered departure, saying there was one more place to visit, as repayment for me providing leads and evidence. Meanwhile, the White Tower was peaceful. Blue Hair came over asking if I wanted to grab a drink after so long. I told him I needed to report to the Vice Tower Master first about this incident. Blue Hair immediately made excuses about urgent matters and left. The Vice Tower Master walked over then, saying he thought he'd just seen Blue Hair. I said he wasn't wrong. Blue Hair looked rushed and ran off in a hurry. The Vice Tower Master said with relief that I'd resolved another major issue, even taking care of the businessman's problem. I smiled and followed the Vice Tower Master's steps, preparing to give a detailed report in his office. Taking the elevator, I noticed the Vice Tower Master looked strangely dejected, so I asked if something had happened. The Vice Tower Master sighed, saying the Helios family had contacted him to take Blue Hair away. I frowned, asking if that guy had agreed himself. The Vice Tower Master said helplessly that apparently they'd already talked to him personally. After reporting everything to the Vice Tower Master, I immediately went to Blue Hair's room. He was packing his belongings. I burst in without knocking, directly asking if he was leaving the White Tower. Blue Hair continued packing, his voice somewhat downcast, saying sorry. When sober, he couldn't bring himself to say it, which is why he wanted to invite me for drinks earlier. He said he should return to his original position to help with the Merchant Guild business and to get married. I was stunned, asking when he'd started dating. Blue Hair's voice grew quieter, saying he heard the other party came from a good family and could help his family a lot. My tone carried a hint of dissatisfaction as I said he made political marriage sound so pleasant. Was he really okay with this? Blue Hair paused, then continued packing, saying the other party was so great, there was nothing to be upset about. I told him to look me in the eyes and answer. Was he really willing to give up magic? Blue Hair fell silent for a moment, then said quietly that he hadn't faced reality. He actually had no talent. Hearing me say he had talent, Blue Hair laughed, saying hearing that from a genius was already satisfying enough. While we were talking, Blue Hair's older brother, the Merchant Guild's young master, entered the room. He told Blue Hair he had 5 minutes to finish packing and come downstairs. The young master's gaze turned to me. After sizing me up, he told us to say our goodbyes. I suddenly asked how much money it would take to buy Blue Hair's freedom. The man turned around, his tone tinged with arrogance, asking who I was to ask such a thing. I told him I was Blue Hair's friend. Now I wanted to propose a mutually beneficial deal. The young master scoffed, asking if being a genius made me so audacious. I said I'd make Blue Hair a ace mage of the White Tower within 2 years, and in the long run, this would be more beneficial for their family. The young master became interested, raising an eyebrow and asking what price I'd pay if I failed. I answered that all profits from the Cardena flu treatment and vaccine for the next 50 years would go to the Helios family, and I had the authority to make this promise. The young master stared at me, asking if I'd go this far for that fool just because of friendship. I shook my head, saying because Blue Hair had that value. Within 5 years at the latest, I'd restore the White Tower to its peak. To achieve this goal, I needed Blue Hair. He was indispensable talent for the new White Tower I envisioned. The young master fell silent for a moment, then said playfully that I was too naive. But as a merchant, there was no reason to pass up an opponent's foolish proposal, though he'd add one condition. He said I needed to prove my own worth, duel his guard tomorrow at noon, and if I won, he'd accept the deal. I thought to myself, he knew full well I was only a level 2 mage. Clearly he had no intention of letting Blue Hair go. After speaking, he turned to leave, warning that if I didn't show up tomorrow at noon, it would be considered forfeiting the deal. After the young master left, Blue Hair urgently grabbed me, asking why I'd agreed to duel a level 5 knight. He said his brother just thought I was too arrogant and wanted an excuse to beat me up. He grew more anxious, even trying to drag me to apologize. I suddenly said, a level 4 mage would be worth fighting, wouldn't they? I gripped Blue Hair's shoulders, my eyes determined, saying I'd make him reach level 4 in one day. The young master only said I needed to prove my ability, not that I had to win the duel myself. Since that's the case, as long as Blue Hair demonstrated level 4 strength, wouldn't that solve the problem? In the training room, Blue Hair muttered anxiously that he'd spent years unable to level up. How could he possibly do it? I told him to first let his magic flow freely through his body. Then I carefully observed the circulation of magic within him. My fingertip lightly touched several points, saying these were nodes where severe loss occurred during his magic circulation. Because there were too many of these defects, Naturally, his spell completion rate couldn't improve. Blue Hair's eyes lit up with hope, asking if fixing these defects would let him level up. I directly shattered his illusion. 99.99% of mages didn't care about this kind of magic loss, but that 0.01% called great mages, without exception, all paid attention to these details. From now on, he'd practice the magic circulation method I taught him every morning. After getting used to it, it would become as natural as breathing. I told him to demonstrate the body-to-wind magic he used in the herb field battle, but Blue Hair said he couldn't do it. He was afraid to use that magic. He slowly recounted the past. As he came of age, he became increasingly anxious. As a mage, he didn't even have any decent achievements. He'd boldly theorized that if his whole body turned to wind, he'd become stronger. At first he thought he'd succeeded, but later realized he'd completely failed. After his lower body completely turned to wind, his magic became totally uncontrollable. His soul felt like it was shattering into tens of thousands of pieces. If the Tower Master hadn't happened to pass by then, he would have died that day. He never wanted to experience that feeling of annihilation again. I questioned that during the battle, he seemed to use it quite well. Blue Hair explained that in critical situations, it was an instinctive reaction triggered subconsciously. Actually, many mages had encountered this problem of losing control of magic, and the solution was quite simple. His issue was lacking the ability to precisely control magic power. He just needed to supplement that part. I smiled mysteriously, saying I had a method to forcibly enhance controllability. Blue Hair watched me draw complex patterns on the ground, asking if I was making a contract with a demon. I answered I was summoning a spirit and would transplant a wind spirit into his body to stabilize his magic. Blue Hair followed my instructions dubiously, concentrating to attempt the summoning, but nothing happened. I shook my head and sighed. It seemed he had zero affinity with spirits. Blue Hair immediately worried about what to do if he couldn't summon a spirit. I reassured him not to panic. In my past life, when I traveled to the spirit kingdom, I learned the orthodox spirit summoning ritual and successfully summoned a spirit. Since I succeeded once, I could definitely do it again. After all, I was the only human in 120 years to successfully summon a spirit. The Spirit King should still remember me. I closed my eyes, recalling that scene from years ago. Back then, it wasn't in this lifeless training room, but in front of the massive world tree, surrounded by countless spirits. Though changing locations, it should still work. The moment I began the summoning incantation, a wind spirit appeared before me. His voice was clear as wind chimes, exclaiming that someone had finally summoned him again. I thought to myself, this guy didn't recognize me. I was the one who summoned him before too. I asked what was needed to form a contract. The wind spirit said he didn't need such formalities. What mattered was heart-to-heart connection. He asked, "Human, do you wish to form an alliance with me, the highest grade wind spirit?" I shook my head, pointing to the dumbstruck Blue Hair beside me. He was the one who needed it. The next day at noon, at the arena, after everyone exchanged greetings, the young master introduced the knight who would fight today, and the simple duel rules: seize the necklace. The young master looked over my attire, saying my outfit didn't look very convenient for battle. I said it was fine since I wasn't the one fighting. Blue Hair stepped out from behind me. The young master's face darkened. I said calmly that I only needed to prove my ability. You never said I had to duel personally. And yesterday I taught Blue Hair some useful things. He'd already reached level 4. In actual combat, everyone could clearly see Blue Hair's growth. I put my arm around Blue Hair's shoulders, my tone confident. To train Blue Hair into the White Tower's ace mage in 2 years, I needed to at least demonstrate this level of ability, right? The young master coldly ordered the knight that even when facing the young master, he absolutely couldn't hold back. I patted Blue Hair's back, saying not to be afraid. He'd definitely win. Blue Hair took a deep breath and nodded, then walked to the center of the arena. After the knight respectfully saluted Blue Hair, the match officially began. Right from the start, Blue Hair quickly retreated backward, creating about 20 meters of safe distance. But the next second, the intense aura emanating from the knight rushed toward him. Even without using sword energy, this level 5 knight's oppressive presence was still suffocating. Blue Hair couldn't help exclaiming, "Is this the true power of a high-ranking knight?" Inner doubt began to grow. He even had thoughts of surrendering. But just then, he caught sight of my determined gaze. Words instantly flooded his mind. I needed him. He was indispensable talent for the new White Tower. Without him, the herb field incident would have ended in disaster. For the first time in his life, someone needed him this much. He absolutely couldn't let down these expectations. Fighting spirit reignited in Blue Hair's eyes as he launched an attack. The knight deflected his offensive, clearly not expecting Blue Hair's improvement to be so significant. And I could see clearly that Blue Hair was now simultaneously wielding dual magic, attacking while neutralizing the opponent's counterattacks. Such technique was truly top-tier offensive and defensive integration. But in the knight's eyes, it was merely entertaining to watch. His gaze sharpened as he suddenly charged at Blue Hair. Blue Hair had no time to overthink. He immediately activated the wind spirit within him, unleashing the storm palm. The young master on the sidelines looked shocked, unable to believe Blue Hair could directly withstand the knight's attack. He privately suspected I'd used forbidden techniques to forcibly enhance him. I calmly responded that he needn't worry. The method I used was both safe and legitimate, but the young master clearly didn't fully believe me. In his view, Blue Hair's weak personality made him unsuitable as a combat mage. He'd eventually get hurt. Better to obediently manage the merchant guild, avoiding grievances and keeping family from worrying, and preventing another incident of being consumed by his own magic. I naturally didn't know what the young master was thinking, but I believed in Blue Hair. The young master paused, saying Blue Hair was clearly at a disadvantage. I thought to myself, the real show was yet to come. Last night in the training room, Blue Hair completed the spirit transplant. He said he still couldn't fully overcome his psychological trauma and couldn't freely transform his body into wind at will. He worried he couldn't win in this state, but I told him Windwalker's ability was far more than just transforming into wind. Its true killing move was integration. As long as he could utilize this, he'd have absolute victory. Anything in contact with his body, clothes, weapons, even random objects he picked up, could transform into wind with him. Duels were about hiding your trump card until the end. Winning through tactics was more interesting anyway. Back at the arena, Blue Hair at a disadvantage was now ready. The next second, his entire body instantly transformed into countless air currents. His figure passed through the knight's body like wind. The moment he swept past the knight's arm, his fingertip precisely hooked the necklace. When he landed, the airflow instantly dissipated and Blue Hair returned to human form. Looking at the necklace in his hand, Blue Hair excitedly laughed and cheered. The young master shot to his feet, waves of shock crashing through his heart. How could Blue Hair have unleashed Windwalker? The healing mage had clearly said Blue Hair would never be able to use this high-level magic again. I gave Blue Hair an approving gesture. The young master looked at his brother on the field, his eyes full of complexity. This younger brother, who'd always been seen as incompetent, had undergone earth-shattering changes in just one day. He fell silent for a moment, then slowly said the words, "I concede." He then bid us farewell with his knight, his tone unusually gentle, asking me to take care of his brother from now on. He awkwardly complimented Blue Hair with remarkable progress. Seeing Blue Hair standing there not responding, he waved and left with "Never mind if you didn't hear it," then turned to leave. I looked at Blue Hair. He'd clearly pretended not to hear on purpose. This was the clumsy warmth unique to their brotherhood. That evening I brought Blue Hair deep into the White Tower. He looked at the ominous stone door before him, his face full of resistance, saying this didn't look like a training room at all. Anyone would see it as a dungeon. I frankly admitted that hundreds of years ago this place was indeed a dungeon. Blue Hair wailed, saying he hadn't done anything wrong, so why did he have to be locked up for training? I told him this was the Vice Tower Master's order, and after rising to level 4, the changes in his magic and newly comprehended techniques needed time to organize and adapt, plus he could use this chance to bond with the spirit. Blue Hair hung his head dejectedly, saying it made sense but still looking unwilling. Actually, the confinement training was my request. The Vice Master didn't personally order it, but this was necessary for Blue Hair. Only in a closed environment could he completely overcome his psychological trauma and fully master Windwalker and the spirit's power. After approving my request, the Vice Tower Master said the young master was letting the White Tower use the Helios Merchant Guild's logistics network for free. Once the White Tower revived, the benefits the Helios family would gain with Ace Mage Blue Hair exceeded imagination. Though the brother's intentions were obvious, his tact was pleasing. Then the Vice Tower Master's expression became serious, saying he wanted me to teach a class. Normally at this time, they'd want me to focus on the potion department to make money. At this juncture, having me handle education, unless the White Tower mages had a reason to become stronger quickly. The Vice Tower Master praised my insight and brought up Mage Night. It was originally a day when mages from all towers gathered, nominally to promote unity, established by the Emperor to strengthen connections between towers. But the Tower Masters would argue whenever they met, and it was abolished after a few years. Bringing it up again at this time, I was immediately certain His Majesty wanted to restart this event. The Vice Tower Master nodded in confirmation, saying though the timing hadn't been publicly announced, the royal family would release details after the new year. He also mentioned worriedly that the Red Tower had become quite guarded lately. I sneered internally. As long as the Red Tower coveted leadership among the 4 major towers, the reviving White Tower would face many obstacles. I immediately agreed to teach the class. Leaving the office, a cold glint flashed in my eyes. I'd never allow the White Tower to be suppressed, even in death. Fortunately, I'd advanced Blue Hair to level 4 early. I silently thanked the Spirit King in my heart. My thoughts returned to when I summoned the spirit. The Wind Spirit was furious, saying there'd never been third-party contract formation before. I asked him to relay a message to the Spirit King now. Tell her the White Mage had returned, and please fulfill this small wish of mine. Hearing this, the Wind Spirit immediately frowned and scolded me. How dare a mere human directly call the Spirit King by name? He absolutely wouldn't relay the message for me. But the next second, he received instructions from the Spirit King. His expression was complex as he said I could actually trouble the Spirit King to give orders personally. He also said the Spirit King permitted transplanting a lower grade spirit. I didn't explain much, just smiled and thanked him. Several days later, holding the special lecture opening notice, I arrived at the classroom in the White Tower's main building. As I entered, I scanned the students present. One student asked confusedly if only those below level 3 could attend this class. A nearby student explained this was basic magic class, and the mid-level mage seniors were all pretty busy. Someone else remarked that the White Tower was really improving morning, hearing the Vice Tower Master personally invited the instructor, and the course was even in the main building. This place used to host royal observation seminars. Someone chimed in, full of anticipation about how amazing the instructor would be. Just then, an arrogant voice rang out. The Earl's son said it was just an unused classroom being lent out, no need to make a fuss. A nearby student urged him not to be so negative, saying it was rare for the White Tower to invest in them. But the Earl's son scoffed, saying if they really invested, they'd prepare high-level application lectures like other towers, not some reinterpretation of basic magic. He also said if this lecture was really that good, that arrogant level 2 genius should grace them with his presence. I raised my hand and cast a silencing spell, interrupting their chatter, then walked to the center of the platform, introducing myself as the instructor who'd be teaching the reinterpreted basic magic lecture starting today. I knew that discovering the instructor was me might disappoint some people. They might also guess I used silencing magic because I was afraid of their gossip, but I didn't mind. I said if they could prove their abilities no longer needed additional refinement, they could leave. But within a 10-minute time limit, they needed to speak one sentence to me. Let me see this class's abilities then. Some students were deep in thought, some looked frustrated, but the Earl's son looked completely composed. 10 minutes quickly passed. I asked if no one succeeded. The Earl's son stood up, his face showing a triumphant smile, saying he'd solved it. I raised an eyebrow, recognizing this kid as the Earl's son. Then I snapped my fingers, canceling the spell, announcing that only the Earl's son passed the test. The Earl's son stood tall, his tone proud as he asked if he could skip the class. I readily agreed, and he froze instead, feeling annoyed. I saw through his thoughts. This kid was clearly curious about the course content, but too stubborn to back down. Since he was the only one to pass the test, I said I'd give him a reward and asked him to come to the platform, asking what his favorite basic magic was. He said Windblade. I told him to cast it now. Several cyan Windblades circled around him as he asked if this was good enough. I nodded, telling him today's lesson would be about Windblade. He froze on the spot, then showed dissatisfaction, asking if I couldn't see the magic power floating around him. I reached out and crushed his Windblades, saying at most they were half-finished products with 2 problems. I slowly paced, my voice clearly reaching everyone's ears, saying water remains water even when still, fire remains fire even when flickering, but wind must keep flowing to be called wind. What he created wasn't Windblade. Strictly speaking, it was Airblade, like stagnant water turning foul. Non-flowing wind magic easily collapses. The White Tower is a place of wind manipulation, meaning our magic must never cease, or it'll be destroyed like just now from being too fragile. He couldn't help asking about the second problem. I told him he consumed too much unnecessary magic when casting. By saving the wasted portion, the power and stability of Windblade would greatly improve. I mentioned he came from a family of generations of White Tower high-ranking mages, surely witnessing family members training magic since childhood, even imitating their casting. Before formal study, imitating the difficult Windblade wasn't easy. He must have barely succeeded using excessive magic years ago, and this habit continued to now. For him, using too much force was a viable method. By fixing these issues, perfect Windblade could be born. After explaining, I shook my head saying it was a pity such an excellent student wouldn't attend class. His cheeks reddened as he awkwardly turned and returned to his seat. I watched his back and chuckled softly. 3 weeks later at the White Tower main building's lounge, many people were quietly discussing me becoming the White Tower's gold instructor, saying every class was packed, even level 4 and 5 seniors came to audit. Supposedly after listening, it really helped with magic training. 3 hours before class, suggesting a friend join for auditing. And as they stood up, everyone in the entire lounge stood up. After everyone rushed to the classroom and quickly found seats. Looking around, they saw even the yellow hair elder was present. Almost class time when I finally appeared, saying everyone arrived at the right time. Today's magic was very important. As White Tower mages, what needed most careful thought was wind magic. This was the most fundamental of fundamentals. Someone quietly complained, saying teaching such widely known basic magic that even non-White Tower people could use was purely a waste of time. Yellow hair elder raised his hand, saying he originally just came to watch the excitement, but really wanted to ask if I was truly teaching them wind magic. I nodded yes, asking the elder to demonstrate the most basic wind magic once. The elder raised his hand, and a powerful current appeared from nowhere, carrying scorching breath as it swept past everyone. Then I looked at the frail girl in the corner, asking her to also cast the most basic wind magic. She raised her hand to cast wind magic, and a gentle current slowly rose. Students exclaimed in admiration, saying it felt like spring breeze on their faces. I asked if anyone noticed the difference between their magic. Everyone answered the question. After listening, I nodded approvingly, saying Ponytail answered correctly. I continued explaining that, as Ponytail said, everyone's magic composition was completely different in nature. Though their spell formulas, structures, and deployment processes were identical, one was hot as desert, the other warm as spring breeze. This difference was so large it was hard to believe. Then I introduced the 4 magic systems to explain, and asked who knew why White Tower and Blue Tower were classified as harmony systems. Someone said because of attribute characteristics. I nodded, then said Red Tower and Yellow Tower were strong and fast but couldn't harmonize, because the world had no cold flames or lightning, while wind and water could infinitely cool or heat up. This was why we represented the harmony system. Then I gave examples. The condition for boiling water was simple, just 100 degrees Celsius heat and some time. Creating hot wind was even simpler, because wind more easily assimilated with surrounding environment. I raised my hand to cast, and two air currents immediately appeared beside students. One scorching as lava, one cold as ice. I told everyone wind was freer than any attribute, able to possess powerful force like red tower flames, speed like yellow tower lightning, or form freedom like blue tower water. It was the only attribute that could contain thousands of natures according to a mage's imagination, harmoniously embracing all things in the world. Therefore, as white tower mages, they must first recognize their understanding and comprehension of wind. This was today's lesson core. Yellow hair elder suddenly murmured, his gaze becoming profound. I immediately stopped students who wanted to wake him, telling everyone to step back, absolutely not disturbing the elder's enlightenment. A student looked at the elder worriedly. I quietly explained this was the moment of awakening, signaling everyone to stay quiet. Moments later, yellow hair elder opened his eyes. The magic aura around him became more condensed and profound. His face showed an excited smile as he stood and hugged me tightly, thanking me repeatedly, even calling me teacher. I patted the elder's back, thinking to myself that, thanks to him, future classes should go more smoothly. After all, those ranked below the elder wouldn't dare cause trouble anymore. And a more significant gain was Ponytail. I'd successfully changed another problematic person recorded in the original owner's diary. The next morning, I came to the Future Innovation Training Room. Yesterday, Ponytail proactively sought me out, saying this place was interesting. Learning I'd never heard of this training room, she looked at me like garbage again. So I decided to investigate. I pushed open the door and walked in. A mechanical voice instantly sounded, introducing that this training room was built using magic engineering technology, and after registering user information would provide customized training courses, asking if I wanted to register now. After the system confirmed I declined registration, it said it would proceed as an unregistered user and asked me to set the desired training stage. I asked confusedly what stage meant. The mechanical system explained the training program had 100 stages to choose from based on one's level. I casually said to start from stage 1. As soon as I spoke, 3 light orbs appeared, moving slowly through the air. The mechanical system explained to destroy 3 moving orbs using physical or magic attacks, also reminding that if wide area magic was used, training would be cancelled. I raised my hand with 3 wind blades, precisely destroying the orbs. The system immediately congratulated me on passing stage 1. This level was way too simple. I wanted to directly do stage 100 training. The mechanical system issued a warning. I told it to just start. The system then explained the rules. Destroy 1,000 orbs using physical or magic attacks. Getting hit by moving orbs 5 times or more would be considered failure. As soon as it finished, countless tiny light orbs poured out like a rainstorm, moving so fast they left only afterimages.